More confidence. Okay. All right. Well, then let's go ahead and call the order the June 1st meeting of the Technical Advisory Committee. And with that, the first item is approval of the agenda. We'll go ahead and approve the agenda unless there's any objections. Not hearing any objections, the agenda is approved. Moving forward to approval of the May 4th, 2022 Technical Advisory Committee meeting minutes. Joe, you want to put those up just for reference for folks?
Can you see them?
No, I cannot.
What do you see?
I see a bunch of squares with people's
I
faces and names.
I see. I did not successfully hit the share button. How about now?
All right. Yep. Now we see it.
Awesome.
You can expand it a little bit. That would be potentially helpful.
Do you mean thusly or thusly?
That way. There you go. That's helpful to some degree, I guess. You can, yeah, there you go. So with the meeting minutes in front of you from May 4th, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Ashfeld move.
All right, Ken with a motion to approve the May 4th, 2022 plan meeting minutes. Is there a second?
And a second.
All right, second by Brian Isaacson. All right, Joe, so all those in favor of approving the May 4th, 2022 Technical Advisory Committee meeting minutes, say aye by roll call. Joe?
Okay. I'm going to go in the order that they appear on the minutes, basically. Solberg.
Yep, aye.
McPherson. Robgent. Labrie.
Aye.
Isaacson.
Aye.
Ellos.
Aye.
Jensen.
Or Lisa?
Oh yeah, Lisa would be the member. Freeze. Jorgensen.
I'll abstain. I wasn't there.
Witter. Keel.
Aye.
Howley.
Aye.
Ellis.
Aye.
Lucher.
Aye.
Omi.
Aye.
I'll take that as an aye. I know he's here. Ashfeld.
Aye.
Culver. Thompson's not here. Coster.
This is Jennifer Hager. I will abstain as Nathan was standing in for me last month.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm reading last month's minutes and I'm not getting. Vol. I think I saw you. Okay. Kurtz.
Aye.
Dermody.
Aye.
Peterson.
Aye.
Larson. Michael Larson. Kotsukos, I don't think you're here. Io.
Aye.
Reef.
Good morning, everyone. Aye.
Fighton. Harrington.
Are we approving the agenda or the minutes?
The minutes.
I'll abstain.
Pittaparthi. Deed has been filled, but I don't think you're here. Eddie, Colleen Eddie. DNR is vacant. McCullough.
Aye.
And pedestrian is vacant, and Andrew Emanuele is not here.
All right, thank you, Joe. Motion passes. The minutes are approved. Moving on to the next item, public comment for committee business. Joe, was there anybody that registered to speak?
There was not.
All right. Moving on to the tab report. Is Elaine on yet, or?
Elena is not going to be on. I'm going to give a tab report.
Okay.
If I can find my tab report. Yep. So, tab last month in May, that was its first meeting back in person, and unlike TAC, tab is it needs to do that due to being under the Minnesota statute for open meeting laws. So council staff will continue to work with legal staff to determine whether there's a way to go more hybrid. So far, it's just totally in person, but that's something we're looking into. Business, tab approved a number of streamlined tip amendments. There was one amendment action to approve 4 new projects. You saw all these, so I'm not going to get too into what the projects were. Another one to approve 3 cost increases, and a final one to approve 3 termini changes. Those were all approved here pretty easily, and we're all on consent at tab. And then there was a tip amendment for the I-94 eastbound lanes project. That was a regionally significant amendment, so they accepted the public comments. That was actually from a month ago, 2 months ago here. They accepted the public comments and recommended adoption into the tip of that project, and that was approved by council not long thereafter. There was the scope change from St. Paul Bruce Vento Elementary School for the Safe Routes to School project, and that went through here last month as well. And tab approved that scope change request to change that little connection from the Gateway State Trail to Arkwright Street on that project to have DNR complete that with their project 1 year earlier. And then tab released the 2023 to 2026 tip for public comment. So we're about, I don't know, 20% through that public comment period. And we've had about 8 comments thus far, but that comment period closes in June. And there were 3 information items, one on the climate action framework, one on the transit onboard survey, and an overview of the 2050 regional development guide and transportation policy plan development. That's all I have about the tab.
All right, thank you, Joe. Any questions for Joe on the tab report? Not seeing or hearing any. Moving on to committee reports, I'll start with the executive committee. The executive committee did meet at 8:15 this morning. Discuss the agenda items in front of us today, and we also had a brief discussion really about process for the future for these meetings at the end of that meeting regarding in-person or virtual, as well as just we did end up putting off information, a discussion about the need or changing any guidance for administrative or streamlining amendments. That will likely come in the upcoming months, so look forward to hearing more about that. That's really all I have on the executive committee. Any questions? Not seeing any or hearing any, we'll move on to the next item, which is 2022-27 Streamlined Tip Amendment for MnDOT's project 35W494, otherwise known as the 494 Easy Pass project. Joe?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. There kind of looks like 5 projects that are included with this, but it's really sort of 1 project or 2 projects, depending on how you look at this. So the action is to increase the total project cost and adding 2 new funding sources to this project, the I-94 Reconstruction and Bridge Replacement Project. And the reason you see 2 new lines here is because this includes the addition of 2 new funding sources. So we do split those up into different project lines, infra and CRISA, COVID relief funds, along with the NHPP funds. Otherwise, you're looking at a cost increase and the addition of the term rehab pavement to this project. Along with this project is the City of Bloomington Interchange construction project on 35W and I-94. And this project isn't changing. It is simply moving from 2025 to 2023 and being advanced constructed. And the reason for that is so both projects can be done at the same time in 2023. So there's it's a big project, but not really a lot changing. The primary change is funding and syncing up the years of the two different projects. And also I'll add that these projects are being changed, or the request is to make a change that is already reflected in the draft 2023 through 2026 TIP. So this is being done in case the project gets underway before that TIP is approved by the USDOT. With that, I would stand for questions.
All right, thank you, Joe. Any questions for Joe on this particular project? As he outlined, this is the 494 Easy Pass project. Really includes the addition of the infra grant that the department, along with Met Council, requested and received, and then the addition of some of the CRISA funds that came to the department last year to help make that project whole, as well as connecting the freight project that Bloomington received funds for the interchange at 35W and 494.
Chair, this is Carl Keel. Just a comment that, while certain components of this project show as Bloomington projects, really the project is being wrapped together and administered entirely by MnDOT at this point.
Yes, good point, Carl. It is, while it shows as a MnDOT or a Bloomington piece, it's really the funds that Bloomington helped secure for the project. So it becomes MnDOT's one consolidated project. Any other comments or questions on this one? I will note for TAC, because it did come up at tab last month on the 494, 694 freight project. This particular project did have a greenhouse gas analysis as part of it. However, I want to make sure that folks understand that that greenhouse gas analysis, while done, is not a complete picture of everything, the impacts of greenhouse gas analysis, but it does evaluate the operations as well as the construction and greenhouse gas. So folks are aware of that if your elected officials should ask. If there's no other comments or questions, I would entertain a motion to recommend that the tab recommend adoption of the amendment for the 22 to 25 TIP.
Mr. Chair, this is Carl.
I'd move that.
Go ahead, Joe. So Joe,
Carl
that's
with a second.
All right, and Carl Keel with a second. So TAC members, we have a motion to recommend that the Transportation Advisory Board recommend adoption of an amendment to the 22 to 25 TIP to increase the total cost and add 2 new funding sources to the MnDOT and Bloomington's I-494 construction, interchange construction bridge replacement projects known as SP 2784-424, 2785-424C as in Charlie, 85-424G as in golf, and 107-010-013 and 107-010-013A as in alpha and C as in Charlie. All right, any further discussion? Not seeing or hearing any. All those in favor say aye by roll call. Joe?
Solberg.
Aye.
McPherson.
Aye.
Robgent.
Aye.
Labrie.
Aye.
Isaacson.
Aye.
Ellos.
Aye.
Breeze. Jorgensen.
Aye.
Witter. Keel.
Aye.
Howley.
Aye.
Ellis.
Aye.
Pizzalucher. Kozlucher? Omi?
Aye.
Ashfield?
Aye.
Culver?
Aye.
Hager?
Aye.
Vol?
Aye.
Kurtz?
Aye.
Dermody?
Aye.
Peterson?
Aye.
Larson? Reef? Reef?
Aye.
AO?
Aye.
Fighton? Harrington?
Aye.
Pittiparthy? And McCullough.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. That will move forward to tab in 2 weeks. Moving on to our next item. Planning Committee, TPP Technical Working Group update. Emily.
Yes, Mr. Chair, one moment here while I grab my notes. Right, so we met last month, our TPP working group, which is mostly made up of folks from tech planning with a few extras to make sure the region is well represented. We heard from council staff. They walked us through the regional visioning process, talked about how that relates with the TPP to regional transportation work, and really just kind of boiled down the role of this working group for the 2050 TPP. We then went into some breakout groups. The conversations that we had, we just kind of talked about shared and different values, kind of our visions and goals for the region. And then we discussed our kind of present and then emergent issues that we felt should be addressed in this next round of the TPP. This group will be meeting again next week at 1:35. We'll hear more staff presentations that will mostly focus on the planning studies that have been done or ongoing or will be conducted, and how we're anticipating those studies will relate to the 2050 TPP. I will note we don't have any tech planning items for next month, so that kind of little first sub meeting that we have on everyone's calendar will be canceled, and we will be meeting at 1:35 for just the TPP working group.
All right, thank you, Emily. Any questions for Emily on the TPP working group? Not seeing or hearing any. It looks like you're off scot-free, Emily. Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 3, Funding and Programming Committee update. And Paul, I don't know, do you want to introduce this before it goes to Steve?
Sure. Mr. Chair, thank you. Unfortunately, Chairman Thompson had to be called away about a half an hour ago. So you couldn't, the Funding Program Committee did meet on May 19th. We bringing forward 2 action items for consideration today. The first one is the adoption of the 2023 to 2026 improvement program, the TIP. This is just contingent on pending any significant public comment. This is an annual item that comes before us for consideration. The TIP includes basically the major projects in the region, including federal transportation funding, and along with any significant regional projects are included in this as well. It's the TIP this year is $5.6 million in highway and freight, bicycle, pedestrian projects. It's roughly 16% of the federal funds in the region. Solicitation it is also included in this document as well. So with that, Joe, do you have I think you got a couple presentations that you'd like to make on this item? Is that correct?
Thanks, Paul. Yes, I have a very brief presentation, and then we have Nick Thompson from Metro Transit to talk a little bit about transit in the TIP, and Molly McCartney from MnDOT to talk about MnDOT's process at arriving at this TIP. So my very brief presentation, most of you have seen this, so I'm not going to be too wordy about it. But so the TIP, as most of you know, is a 4-year list of projects funded in whole or in part with federal funding. Any projects that affect air quality have to be in the TIP, and that includes whether or not they were federally funded or not. Those are our regionally significant projects. Every MPO in the country does this and is required to do so. And then once we have completed the TIP, it goes into the USDOT, and they approve it, or it goes to MnDOT, I'm sorry, who incorporates it into their statewide transportation improvement program, and then to the USDOT. Actually, it does go to WISDOT as well, but we haven't had a project in the little tiny Wisconsin part of the MPO for several years. So here's our schedule. TAB released this on May 18th for public comment. It's a 45-day public comment period that ends on July 5th. They will consider those comments at their August 17th meeting and approve or recommend approval of the TIP onto Transportation Committee and the Council, who will approve it in September, and that should be of 2022. And then MnDOT then includes this TIP into its STIP along with all the other projects statewide, and passes on to the USDOT, who approves. That November-December date is probably a little bit pessimistic. It's usually about November 1st. Paul mentioned this a little bit, but it's a $5.6 billion total. That's a little bit higher than last time. I think last year's TIP was about $5.2 billion. The funding by mode is roughly the same as we've seen in the past. Just under half. It is usually just over half, but just under half in transit, and then most of the rest of the highways. And that's all I have. I know it's brief, but Nick and Molly will probably be talking about the meat of what makes up the TIP, which is all the projects in there. There's about 500 projects. So with that, I'd stand for questions, or we can move on to the presentations.
Thank you, Joe. Why don't we go ahead and move forward to Nick?
What happened? So Nick, would you like me to share the?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes. All right. Here comes yours.
I'll cover briefly the transit funding that's in the TIP here. Next slide. So this includes all transit projects in the region that have federal funding, both either capital or operating. There is occasion that we do have operating federal funding. We do plan all our transit projects in the region to use federal funds through procurements. Every once in a while, we might have one that becomes just locally funded, but we have it in the TIP. We have the transit projects that are funded through the regional solicitation in here. And we also have quite a bit of projects in here, or dollar-wise, that are through competitive grants. Some that we are anticipating that we haven't secured yet. We have Met Council has a 6-year CIP that informs the TIP projects for both Metro Transit and our regional providers. So that each year we're kind of in the same cycle. We approve our CIP in a cycle that informs the TIP process. I'll touch on briefly too, a big change this year is that we're a significant new investment in transit as a result of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA. Next slide. So I thought I'd break down a little bit about, there's two parts. Our transit funding is both for state of good repair of our existing systems, but also we are in the middle of a major capital expansion for transit. This is a vision that's been in our TPP and funded through substantially through locally through our county sales tax, but also some major state investment. And so over half of our dollar value of transit investment in this draft TIP is to expansion. In this time frame of this TIP, that expansion includes the E and F line, which were funded through regional solicitation in part, also state funding. The gold line, which we anticipate opening bids on next week for the gold line for construction. Green line extension, which continues to be under construction, and the purple line BRT system. Next slide. So kind of in summary, the types of transit projects that are within here are major capital maintenance. We are doing in the middle of a major fare box replacement program through the region, through all the providers. Part of this was funded through regional solicitation. We often do significant investment in the maintenance and upgrade of shelters. We're making sure that everything is in conformance with ADA. We have an ADA transition plan that we're working through and making investments in. And then we have significant, existing public and support facilities like bus garages, but also transit stations and transit facilities. A big part of our transit investment is just in maintaining our fleet. So a lot of that is bus replacement once they've reached their end of life, a bus. What is kind of the new things in the tip this year is electric bus. So a significant new investment plan for electric bus and electric bus infrastructure. Those two line items, infrastructure would be mainly the chargers for electric bus. We're anticipating over $100 million of investment in that in this time frame of this draft tip. That is both buses that we are replacing because they reach end in life, and also we have some electric buses planned for Gold Line and Purple Line. Our expansion projects, as I mentioned, Green Line, Purple Line, and Gold Line for guideways. In this time frame, we have the E and F line. The regional solicitation this year, we anticipate the G line being funded, and then that'll be added to a future tip. Next slide. There are federal funds besides the competitive funding, like capital investment that funds, for example, the Gold Line. We have 3 formula fund categories: 5307, 5337, and 5339. 5307 is a more general that allowed for all types of capital investment. We use it mainly for capital maintenance or replacement of existing facilities or infrastructure. It does allow for some operating expenses if needed, but usually it's capital. Then 5337 is divided in between rail and bus, and is only for preservation of existing systems. And then 5339 is bus and bus facility grants that we receive formula. We also have some competitive processes this year for bus and bus facility, particularly around electric bus that will be likely our region will be successful in receiving some competitive grants around that. Next slide. There's a lot of questions about what does the IIJA mean for transit. This is a snapshot of what it means for year 1. Significant new investment across the various funding categories. This is in the formula side of the business, not the competitive. There's advantages, I think, in the competitive grant application too. But overall, 33% increase in funding to the region this year. And what we anticipate, we don't know the next 4 years of IIJA yet, but anticipate that it's that 33% over 21 will continue in each of the years of that bill, with some slight increases, inflationary increases. So this is a major new investment. We have not programmed in this draft tip yet this new funding, in part because we just received the actual allocation fairly late in the process. So we will need to be prioritizing year 22 funds. This is the regional formula funds that come into the region and are distributed between Metro Transit, MTS, and the suburban transit providers. So we're across the board seeing major new investment, which is good news. And then that's just all I have. I'd be happy to take any questions about transit items within the draft tip.
All right, thank you, Nick. Maybe if we can just hold questions to the very end, we'll go directly to Molly.
And Molly, did you want to share yours? Or you want me to share?
Oh, Joe, I'll pull it up if that works.
No problem. Yep.
All right. Morning, Chair Solberg and TAC members. Let me know when you see a screen.
Yep, what's up?
Okay, great. Hi, I'm Molly McCartney. I work for MnDOT Metro District. I manage our capital investment program and do some other long-range planning work. I'm on the Funding and Programming Committee of TAC. I'm going to give an overview of our 4-year program. Metro. Metro District has the good fortune of almost having identical boundaries as the 7-county MPO area. And so here is a map of the gray shaded represents the geographic area in Metro District, includes Chisago as well as the Met Council 7-county area. The black hash line shows the MPO planning area, which does go into right in Sherburne County and a little bit into Wisconsin. So it's really actually helpful that our area or our district capital program mirrors the TIP. So that is helpful and a reminder that to folks that we're working on a local, regional, state, and federal way of thinking all the time in Metro District. And then just a little bit of background on how we go from our long-range plans to projects. Everything is informed by our 50-year vision, Minnesota Go, and that feeds into the statewide multimodal transportation plan, which is a plan for the state and not just for the department. We call it the SMTP for short. It goes through a required 5-year update cycle. And so you've been hearing about that in a number of meetings. We're updating that right now. SMTP influences a number of modal and systems plans. The one I work with a lot is our State Highway Investment Plan, or MnSHIP for short. And that gives direction on how MnDOT should be spending its money on the trunk highway system. Other plans you probably have heard about is the statewide and district ped and bike plans, and depending on if you're working on any other modes, hear about some of our freight and other modal plans. Again, a little linear example of how we get to construction projects. The MnSHIP has a 20-year window in which it looks at revenues and needs on the system. Years 11 through 20 have investment targets and not any projects. But once we get to year 10, we develop a capital highway investment plan, or CHIP. And so we're starting to identify bridge and pavement needs, as well as some of our other ancillary needs like roadside infrastructure and bike and pedestrian needs. And then in year 5, projects are scoped as they go into consideration for inclusion in the STEP. And we do all these updates annually. MnSHIP, like SMTP, also has a state requirement to update every 5 years. And you'll start to hear more about that this summer as we bring that out for public engagement. A few years ago, the department adopted a project selection process in which projects are given scores, typically in the CHIP years or as they move into the STEP. And so we've got some direction on how to score different types of projects. What is the leading asset project is driven by, whether it's pavement condition bridge, mobility, or other needs. And so we update this. We update new projects every year. Once project's given a score, it stays. But when this was being developed, it was counted there was 99 ways to fund a project in the STIP, and then we've added some more since then. So there's project funding can be really complicated, and project selection process was intended to just help inform why projects are being selected. So in MnSHIP, we have these investment categories, and I have started to think about the investment categories as like the DNA of a project. So it is a project might have one or more of these components in it. And so, but we have categorized, we have targets for investment category, level, And then we report out on when we've scoped projects. So our major focus is Fix It First, system stewardship, where we look at pavement, bridge, roadside infrastructure like stormwater management, lights, all sorts of the existing assets on the system, as well as facilities like our truck stations and rest stops, and jurisdictional transfer are also considered under system stewardship. Traveler safety, this includes the HSUP program and other traffic safety projects or components of a project. Critical connections is a mobility category, mobility and multimodal category. So the expansion program, which includes freight and highway funding, or funding for freight on highways, and then bicycle and accessible pedestrian infrastructure. Some of the ADA compliant work we're doing. Healthy communities right now, our one sub bullet point is regional community improvement priorities. In Metro, that's primarily the state aid, local LPP program, local participation program, local priorities program, one of those P's. And as well as our landscaping program we have. And then other includes project delivery and some other small programs. Project delivery includes our consultant budget for projects, right-of-way acquisition for projects, and then post-letting change orders or supplemental agreements in the field. So any one project can have many of these categories built in. We're always trying to do long range or long-term improvements on some of the mobility projects as well. I have two pie charts to show you. One is this one. So this is our district investment categories in our draft. So this is just the MnDOT led projects. This does not include other federal funded projects like from the Regional Solicitation or FTA. This is just MnDOT's funding, and the green, this corresponds with the previous slide for the investment categories. Green is showing the system stewardship. Blue is showing that critical connections are expansion, and you'll see Twin Cities Mobility is about 27% of the program, and this includes the Corridors of Commerce projects, 494 and 252-94. That is a program funded by the legislature and is outside of the MnSHIP targets that we get. So I'd just like to point that out that it's we are getting funding that is outside of our normal funding through our plans and policies. So you can see the percentage of this 4 years where it's going, and then the real numbers are on the side. It's about a $1.8 billion program. 23 is a really large year. We have a number of significant projects getting underway. And then I just wanted to pull out the Corridors of Commerce funding just to show this is probably a better representation of what our department plans would have us spending on our capital investment program. So you can see with that shift of taking Corridors of Commerce funding out, the system stewardship green slices of the pie get a little bigger, and the Twin Cities Mobility is 14% of the overall spending. So without Corridors of Commerce, that's where what this 4-year program looks like. And then I did point out, I think, I crossed out in red what that total funding is, and normally we'd be spending $206 million over the 4 years without Corridors of Commerce. So big changes in this year's 23 through 26. A program is we're added federal funds that we've been granted in the last year or so. The Minnesota Highway Freight Program funds are in the draft, as well as an in-fund grant raise the department received, and then some COVID, the CRISA funding that we received last year as well. The Corridors of Commerce projects, 494 is programmed with this additional infra and freight money that was awarded last year. And then the 252-94 project is in 2026 and associated local funding from the Regional Solicitation and the freight program that Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, and Hennepin County have received. And it's this project is going through the EIS process right now. So it is a really general description, and then quarters of commerce money is just what has been awarded. So it still has scoping to go through, but that is where it is parked for now. I'll let you, this is in the attachment that you can access in the agenda. I won't go through the first 3 years too much, but I'll just talk about 26. So this is year 4. This is what is entering this draft. Again, like I just said, the Quarters of Commerce project on 25294 is programmed in this year. It's awaiting EIS results, and depending how that goes, it might be next year or the year after that it gets fully funded or fully programmed. Not fully funded. Some other large projects on Highway 77 or Cedar Avenue, from a big pavement concrete improvement job from Bloomington to Apple Valley, Highway 12 out in western Hennepin County. The 394 Dunwoody Bridge in Minneapolis will have a significant rehab project. There's 14 bridge structures included with the main one. A lot of other roadside and ADA work will happen. We'll have significant traffic impacts. And then Highway 280 will also have significant pavement and bridge projects starting in 26. That has been also in coordination with, it's close to the Rethinking I-94 corridor as well. So just, we always identify issues and risks when we update the program. So this is the Perennial Programming. Conundrum is that it's an ever-changing program. We are expecting new revenue through the recent federal reauthorization, IIJA/bill. That was, those targets are not programmed in this draft. In fact, we don't have legislative authority from the Minnesota legislature to spend any new increased revenue outside of the current biennium budget. So you might have seen some articles in the newspaper about that. So it's not included in the draft. Earmarks and grants are having a number of programs have increased with the reauthorization. So we anticipate MnDOT as well as our partners to go after this new federal funding. And then you know, when I put this together, we were still in the legislative session. Maybe it's a season now. To be determined if we see a special session to deal with any of this federal infrastructure funding and the matching state funds that we need to spend any of that as well. Again, like I mentioned, the next MnChip is going to impact projects starting in 2027 and beyond, and we'll see more engagement this summer on that. So that is my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions or go back through slides if you have some.
All right, thank you for that, Molly. And at this point, I'll go ahead and open up to TAC. Any questions for either of our or any one of our 3 presenters on the tip?
Can we get copies of those PowerPoints, John?
Go ahead, Linda. Say that again.
Oh, can we get copies of the PowerPoint?
Yes, I think we can get copies of those PowerPoints. Joe, you make sure you send those out. Perfect. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Chair. Great presentations by all 3 of you. Really appreciate all that information. And I've had a chance to skim over the tip and I'm generally comfortable with it. But I did want to ask about the public participation part of this. I note that it hasn't closed. It's not going to close till July. I am a little concerned about that. Seems like a great opportunity to have the public help us out and identify any potential issues, either with the fiscal constraint test or the TPP consistency. And I'm wondering if it would be wise, or if we have the ability to lay over our decision until we've had the benefit of hearing what people have to say. And I do recognize that we can probably predict what people are going to have to say, but you never know, and there could be some benefit to it. So I think that question's for Joe.
Okay. Joe, do you want to answer Bill's question?
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair and Bill and members. Thanks for bringing it up. It's probably important that we share the rationale for the schedule. The technical committees are making technical recommendations, a technical recommendation, I should say, that the TIP is technically correct and contains all the projects and information necessary. Under our adopted processes, the TAC doesn't review or recommend responses to public comment. That's actually true not just of the TIP, but of most of our other processes. Once the technical reviews have been completed, that piece of the process is complete. Public comments going straight to tab is very common for most of our plans and programs. So our take then is that that Bill, you brought up the fiscal constraint and the consistency of the TPP, that those are met at this point, and I don't think the comments are going to bring up anything different. So in terms of if we were to delay this to either July or August TAC meeting, it wouldn't necessarily jeopardize the process, but it would be a little bit against some of what we've seen historically in terms of when we have these events occur versus the public comment period. So if you know, people can talk about what they want to see this summer, and we're flexible enough to be able to change the process a little bit and talk about what we would do next year.
Joe, so if I am interpreting what you said correctly, staff has said that the TIP is fiscally constrained. You're from a Met Council staff perspective, it is the fiscal constraint is met and it's consistent with the TPP. However, you are, it sounds like, depending upon discussion, that there is flexibility in the process. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
As far as timeline.
Yeah. So if people really feel that we can do that, and then I think in the meantime we would talk about what the appropriate approach is going forward. I don't want to necessarily set a precedent here, but I will tell you that if they're moving a decision would not jeopardize the entire process of approving the TIP.
Okay. All right. Yep. And I just wanted to clarify your comment there, and I'll go to Innocent next.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Mr. Chair. My question is directed to Molly. In the presentation you did, there was a section that you showed mentioned investment categories, and you listed a system stewardship, critical connections, then one was healthy communities. And you mentioned some regionals plus community improvement project. What I wanted to find out, I know, I think on this TIP period, we haven't included some of the funding from the recently approved investment bill act. I wanted to find out the funding that was included in the infrastructure bill that has set aside some funding for climate change strategies, and another one for like residency program that help us to improve on residency effects from climate change on like MnDOT infrastructures, storm and all those things. Where would that funding be included? Would it be under healthy community or some other areas that type of funding would be included?
Chair, members, thanks, Innocent, for that question about some of the new programs we're seeing in the reauthorization of the Surface Transportation Act, or IIJA bill. up a slide that shows the investment categories that you're talking about in the purple section, I think is what you've mentioned. Now, the new programs in IIJA, we haven't that funding, and we are all still learning what the new programs, either the formula money or the discretionary grants are. Discretionary grants, applications that we're going after, we would, once they're programmed, I think we'd have that funding represented. And any increase to the formula or the regular funding that we get from federal highways, we haven't yet figured out how that's gonna come into the program. As we do the MnSHIP update, we might be hearing more about that. There are likely to be new and augmented MnSHIP categories. This presentation will look different next year. I'll probably be talking about more bullet points as our planning for investment just gets a little more sophisticated and nuanced over time. So more to come on IIJA once we know more, and once we get the permission to spend the money, and continuing to talk with folks about that. And I'll just mention right now, MnDOT has 2 work groups. One is the Programming Update Work Group, or PUW, and a new one called Climate Resilience Work Group, or CRW, that are meeting. And they are statewide groups, not just internal, but partners as well, on trying to talk about some of this new funding. These are groups that typically meet after a federal reauthorization. And I don't know, Innocent, are you on CRW?
No, probably didn't know about it. I would love to be.
Okay, and I don't, maybe Amanda is, but I'm not sure. Let me check that. I can do that, but I think a number of folks on the call right now are involved in those groups too. And next week's CIC meeting, or Capital Improvements Committee meeting, is going to have those items on it, in which we'll talk about metro impacts and influence. So you'll see an agenda item, coming tomorrow or Friday for me on that.
Okay, right. Thank you.
All right. Any further questions? Oh, Charlie, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a question for Nick on his presentation about the IIJA funding coming in. How are you planning for the 20% match in all of this? Has that been accounted for?
Yeah, that's a great question. We had some budget proposals at the state for either bonding or general fund that would be used for match, and of course that was not acted on. And so our match option is generally our regional transit capital bonding. We do believe we have sufficient match available for 2022. We haven't forecasted the out years yet, but if our regional transit capital bonding is our local match, we would, that is also tied to legislative action. They approve the amount we can in regional transit capital. So we'd have to adjust our request legislatively to match what is needed for the increase in federal funding.
Any follow-up on that, Charlie, or is...
No, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Nick or Molly? Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
So yeah, I did ask my main question, and would now be an appropriate time for a motion, Chair?
Yes, we can, if there's no further discussion, and I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity if there's any questions. I would remind folks, I think, to what Joe was speaking to, is typically our role as the TAC is as a technical review of the tip, and the public comment period is not, or public comments not something we generally review prior to making recommendation, but we do get comments back so that we know and understand what the public has been saying. So not seeing any other hands up, Bill, so I would entertain a motion.
Okay, so first a little explanation. I do appreciate that our review is technical, and I would not ask to review all the public comments, but I would, with a 118-page tip that refers to all sorts of other information embedded within these projects, there's a lot of complexity there. And so what I would move is that we lay over our recommendation to our August meeting and ask staff to just highlight any technical issues that could benefit from our analysis that came out of public comment, if there are any, surprisingly. So that would be my motion, lay over to August TAC meeting.
Okay, all right. So TAC committee members, we have a motion. We'll wait here a minute for any further discussion. So we have a motion in front of us to lay over or hold any recommendation on the tip until our August meeting. Is there a second? And I hope we have a Robert's Rules of Orders folks here just in case. Do we have a second on the motion to continue the tip recommendation until the August meeting? And I'm not seeing a second. All right, who's our Robert's Rules expert if a motion fails to get a second?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I believe if you don't get a second, then the motion doesn't carry forward to a vote.
Okay.
It fails, yeah.
All right, I'm just making sure here.
Again, I'll check Joe on that, but I think that's the case, yeah.
Okay, for a third time, is there a second to recommend that TAC hold over the recommendation of the tip? Or I got to read it as we go to make sure so folks understand that the TAC funding and program, or that the recommendation that TAB adopt the draft 23 to 26 skip until our August meeting. All right, not seeing any. The motion fails for lack of a second. All right, Molly, you have a hand up.
Thank you, Chair and TAC members. I just wanted to comment on any on the schedule of the state transportation improvement program. This MPO's tip feeds into the state program. It's not just MnDOT's program, but it's all federal transportation funds. There are other MPOs and other districts that feed into this tip, and the delaying a comment period until August with TAC and then going through TAB and the council process after that would significantly delay the state's program. I'm not sure of all the impact or implications of that, but it could jeopardize the overall adoption process so that it would be further out past this fall and the timing. There might be subsequently a lot of amendments and other program impacts that I'm not entirely sure with. So just a comment from me on that.
Okay, thank you, Molly. Steve, you have a comment?
Yeah, I want to thank Bill for his motion here. If we do go forward today with the TAC recommendation, I think from a staff perspective, what we could do to entertain Bill's idea a little bit would be we could come back with an information item at the TAC in August. At that point, we won't have a full public comment report prepared because of the deadlines, but we could come back to this group as an information item and go through the public comments from a big picture standpoint on what we've heard, and maybe that would be kind of sufficient to Bill's comment there. So that's one thing we could offer.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Steve. And I think understanding where Bill, where you were coming from, I would make that recommendation to staff that bring back any comments that are technical in nature. Maybe do some analysis on that as to the type so that TAC understands what those might be or what information might be coming out so that we can address those in future years in our process. So I think that would be helpful for us as a committee. All right. Now we're back to the item at hand.
So, Mr. Chair, with the understanding that we would have that informational item in August, I would move approval of the tip.
All right. Thank you, Carl. We have a motion in front of us to recommend to tab the adoption of the 23-26 STIP. Is there a second?
Mr. Chair, this is Paul Omi. Second that.
All right. We have a motion and now a second by Paul Omi to recommend to tab adoption of the 23-26 Transportation Improvement Program with consideration for public comments. Any further discussion on that item? Not seeing or hearing any. All those in favor say aye by roll call. Joe?
Solberg.
Aye.
McPherson.
Aye.
Robgent.
Aye.
Labrie.
Aye.
Isaacson. Isaacson.
He had to take off.
Ah, gotcha. Thanks. Elos.
Aye.
Freeze. Okay, saw you. Jorgensen.
Aye.
Keel.
Aye.
Howley.
Aye.
Ellis.
Aye.
Poselucher. I have not seen him in a while. He had technical issues. Omi.
Aye.
Ashfeld.
Aye.
Pulver.
Aye.
Hager.
Aye.
Vole.
Aye.
Hertz.
Aye.
Dermody.
Aye.
Peterson.
Aye.
Steve Peterson.
Aye. Time for you.
Larson. I think I saw you now.
Here.
Okay. IO.
Aye.
Reef.
Aye.
Harrington. Harrington. And McCullough.
Aye.
And Joe, Scott Merrick is on for Brian, so you may want to call on him now for further votes and for this one.
Okay. Merrick.
Aye.
Thank you. That's it.
All right, motion passes. That item 2322 through 2022-24 will move forward to tab in 2 weeks. Moving on to our next item number 2022-26, program year extension request by Hennepin County. Joe, you want to give us a report?
Will do. So Hennepin County received $5.5 million in the 2018 regional solicitation to improve bicycling access and safety along University Avenue from the I-35W bridge to Oak Street Southeast in Minneapolis for this program year 2022. The county is requesting an extension in the program year to 2023 because the project interacts with 6 potential E-line arterial bus rapid transit stations and cannot be granted federal authorization until environmental documentation is complete for the E-line. MnDOT Metro District State Aid worked with them, and MnDOT Metro District State Aid is able to use the released 2022 funding for early reimbursement of advanced construction to other projects. So there's not really an impact on the program as a whole. And the Hennepin County understands that they will need to do the project in 2023, though right now reimbursement of federal funds is scheduled for 2026. That, of course, through all the processes that we have with moving funds around could change and they could see funding reimbursed earlier, but for now they'd be waiting until 2026. And with that, I would stand for questions.
All right, thank you, Joe. All right, any questions for Joe on this program year extension request? I'm not seeing or hearing any, but it is Chad. I don't know if you're on right off the bat, but can you explain a little bit how this came about?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This came about working with Metro Transit, and their E-line goes through this project area and crosses these BRT station platforms. So to coordinate the projects through project development that has been ongoing. And it was just recently learned that that the Hennepin County could not get authorization to proceed with their bidding their project until the environmental work was done for the E-line. So plans are currently at 100% and finalized, so everything was on track. But to really do these stations correctly, to include some of the work, the flat work in the Hennepin County's project, so it's all set up for the E-line to come through. We're informed that from FTA that environmental documentation needed to be completed, actually from FHWA. So we are waiting for that to be completed and to keep these projects moving together, which would be the best for that area and the public.
All right, thank you, Chad. So as I understand, then what we have is the issue again with funding availability and lining up projects in the environmental process, which FHWA is saying you can't move forward with your project because that could potentially impact the environmental document for the E-line. I think that's, if knowing FHWA enough, that's essentially the reasoning behind it then. So appreciate that. So again, that's a issue of environmental documentation and funding, I think, much like we talked about at 252 last year. So with that, any questions for Chad or Joe on this particular item? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to approve Hennepin County's program year extension.
This is McCullough, so moved.
All right, we have a motion by McCullough to recommend approval. Is there a second?
Innocent AO, second.
All right. Thank you, Innocent. All right, so TAC members, we have a motion in front of it, motion and a second in front of us to recommend that TAB approve Hennepin County's program year extension request to move its University Avenue and 4th Street Bikeway, otherwise known as SP 027-636-012 from fiscal year 2022 to fiscal year 2023. Any further discussion on that item? Not seeing any. All those in favor say aye by roll call. Joe?
Solberg.
Aye.
McPherson.
Aye.
Robjent.
Aye.
Labrie.
Aye.
Isaacson. Oh, here you got
Merrick, aye.
Merrick. Thank you. Sorry. Ellos.
Aye.
Freeze. Jorgensen.
Aye.
Keel.
Aye.
Howley.
Aye.
Ellis.
Aye.
Kozlucher. Omi.
Aye.
Ashfield.
Aye.
Culver.
Aye.
Hager.
Aye.
Vole.
Aye.
Kurtz.
Aye.
Dermody.
Aye.
Peterson.
Aye.
Ao.
Aye.
Reef.
Aye.
Harrington. And McCullough.
Aye.
That's it.
Got something in the chat, a vote. Michael Larson says aye.
Oh, thank you. I can't see the chat when I'm sharing. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
Boy, I pumped everything into all that good stuff and I was on mute. All right, motion passes. Moving forward onto our next item, information. And Steve, I believe you have an update for us on the regional solicitation schedule.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is just a brief update, but more to keep you. I've got several emails on kind of where we're at in the process here. So again, we had 155 applications, a new record submitted for the regional solicitation. F&P looked over the qualifying at its May meeting and deemed that all 155 should pass through to be scored. We did have a little bit of a discussion on a Brooklyn Park trail bridge project over Highway 252, as they're in the middle of a EIS process, and in working with FHWA, they agreed that the project can be scored and even awarded funding, but if it is selected in the end here, we would hold on putting that project into the TIP until the environmental document concludes. So I think we found a good solution there, that we would hold it from the TIP if it gets funded in the end here. So the next step is the scoring process. Many of you are on that, so thank you in advance for your work there. We've had kickoff meetings led by Joe and Bethany and our scoring committee chairs. Getting through the first round of our kickoff meetings. Hope to have most of the scoring done in June and early July, at which point we'll have a second meeting of those groups, work through any issues, and then the schedule is at the July funding and programming, we would have draft scores at that meeting that would be available to that committee and then the general public. Then we would have an appeals process like we do every time. Again, the appeals, we've tightened that up a little bit in working with you on the application. So more working with our F&P chair, the number of appeals that the committee is going to hear is going to be less unless there's kind of a major mistake. But if it's more of a subjective kind of opinion on a score, the chair has, F&P chair has some discretion as to if that kind of proceeds or not. So at the August F&P meeting, we will be finalize the scores, hear the appeals, finalize the scores, at which point we will start developing funding scenarios kind of late August, September, and then the approval process comes before TAC and then TAB in November for the slate of projects here. The attachments that Joe is showing on the screen here, we've got a summary of all the projects, application summary. We've got the one pager. So one of the pieces of the application is that you and others submit a one pager. So we've pulled all those out. I think that's interesting to look through, to read all these one pagers on all the projects. That's also available to the scores. On our project website, we do have all the applications that have been uploaded. So if you want to look in particular at a specific project, you can do that. Scores will be relying heavily on those links. After this meeting, Joe will send out a map that we've created of all the applications, their locations geographically throughout the region. So again, another point of information for this committee and others. And then maybe last thing that we did want to mention, we would like to do not a formal public comment period, but more of a public input opportunity for the general public. And that would be more in the July and early August timeframe. This would be an online process where we would ask about modal priorities and then almost kind of force some decision making within each of the modes. So you can't just zero out roadways, or you can't just zero out transit and say put all the money into your favorite mode. We're going to say you at least have to spend the minimum that TAB has approved in each of the modal funding categories. And knowing that, and how would you like to divvy up $100 million between this, and this category? So we're going to try and force some of that decision making through this online process, which I think should be interesting. Participants will have a sense for, we got 49 trail applications, so you'll know the kind of how much we got in as far as the demand there, but it will ask them, do you like safe routes to school more, or do you want to fund this many trail projects? And I think we will bring that back to this committee, and maybe even have TAC do that exercise themselves and see where we land, which could be another input to the process. So I think with that, Mr. Chair, I will see if people do have questions on the schedule moving forward, or general solicitation questions.
All right, thank you, Steve. Yeah, so any questions for Steve on that process? Steve, I think, just sounds like an interesting exercise to go through for public to comment on the general category and expenditure of funds. Right, you're not including the specific projects in those types of questions. It's more about priorities then.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. So the point is to have it early enough in the process that they don't see their favorite project on the list and then just vote that way.
Okay. All right. Any questions or comments for Steve or anything to think about with that presentation? Not seeing or hearing any for right now. Steve, appreciate it. Thanks for the update. Moving on to other business. This is the point where generally ask for any agency updates or anything of those nature. So I will start with just a quick news item. Of course, Nancy Daubenberger has been named the commissioner for the Department of Transportation. Many of you are aware of and know Nancy as either the statewide bridge engineer or the deputy commissioner for the past several years. Right now, she is looking to fill her deputy commissioner chief engineer position. Interesting piece of note is that she will be filling that temporarily for I think the remainder of the year, and it may be either an engineer or a non-engineer. If it's a non-engineer, she will retain the chief engineer position for the department. Second piece is the SMTP comment period will be opening up this month, so highly recommend folks get a chance to look at that, send in comments on it. That only helps our transportation system as a whole, so, and the policy guiding it. All right, any others that have news or information they'd like to share with all our partners here?
Mr. Chair, this is Innocent.
Yep, go ahead, Innocent.
Yes, the MPCA is encouraging private, public, and non-profit sectors to apply for Diesel Emission Reduction Act grant. It's called DERA grant. These grant funds reduce emissions from older diesel-powered off-road equipment, like most of series or counts used for construction, those things. And we hoping that this grant will help to improve diesel equipment air quality and also improve health at the same time. So the application deadline is August 4th of 2022. Total funds approximately about $1 million. And award maximum is 400,000. There is also some specific matching requirement. So counties, cities, and agencies interested in that should try and apply. I will send information to Joe to send to the members, committee members. And then my second update is that the MPC has closed the comment period for the draft framework action. That's the climate change framework action. Right now, we're just currently processing document and working to update the document. Then later on, we'll let people know what the process would be. But now we have closed the comment period for that document. That's all. That's what I have.
All right, thank you, Innocent. Appreciate the updates on the potential solicitation and the climate action framework. That's those are good pieces of information to know. Any others with information for the committee? Not seeing or hearing any at the moment. That concludes our business items for today. And with that, we can adjourn. Thank you all for attending today and providing input. I will note that the July meeting of TAC is on July 6th. As of right now, we don't have any agenda items that cannot wait till August, but we will keep the meeting until approximately 10 days before, just to make sure that if there's a amendment or anything that needs to be done in a timely fashion, that it can be. So keep your eye on your calendar, but at this point, we are not canceling the July 6th meeting, but look forward to seeing that happen end of June here. So, all right. Thank you all. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.